Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire, sponsored and promoted by Glenlivet Books. A book published earlier this year reveals in a fascinating light the relationship between Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Lal Krishna Advani. But it also has some very shocking and some would say controversial revelations to make about Narendra Modi as Chief Minister of Gujarat in 2002 and about Amit Shah when he was a young MLA in 1998. And here is the book. It's called Jugalbandi, and its author, Vinay Sitapati, is my guest today. Vinay Sitapati, I want to focus later on what you call the Jugalbandi between Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Lal Krishna Advani. But let me start with the dramatic revelation you make about Amit Shah. You write that in 1998, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee carried out nuclear tests, and I'm now going to quote your book, Amit Shah was so angry at the tests that he wrote a letter to the Prime Minister, and the letter says, "Respected Vajpayee Ji, because of your greed for publicity, you have forever lost Pakistan Occupied Kashmir." And when Vajpayee as Prime Minister summoned Shah to Delhi for an explanation, Amit Shah said to him that Morarji Desai had told him that if we both, that is to say India and Pakistan, become nuclear powers, we can never win back POK through war. So are you claiming that Amit Shah was a critic of the nuclear tests and that he believed going nuclear was a terrible mistake?
Well, but Karan, he was a critic from the right. This is very, very important, right? And the point of that story is twofold, which is one is it tells you that the BJP of that era was actually quite internally democratic. That people were surprised that a lowly MLA is writing to the Prime Minister. But Karan, you were a journalist during the Vajpayee years. The Vajpayee cabinet frequently disagreed with each other. There was a healthy debate. So that's point one of the story. Point two of the story, Karan, is how deep the idea of Akhand Bharat is embedded in Hindu nationalism. Logically, and my book begins in the 1920s itself, logically, Hindu nationalists like Savarkar should have actually supported partition because the Muslim percentage in India was reduced from about 25% of British India to 13%. And the Hindu percentage, the Hindu vote bank, moves from about 80% to 75%, but they don't. Because one of the aspects of Hindu nationalism that has something in common with traditional Hinduism is this idea of sacred geography, the idea that POK is part of the Hindu imagination of religious territory. And Amit Shah, and not just Amit Shah, wide swaths of the BJP and RSS still today see partition as a reversible calamity. I mean, it's just a fact.
Vinay, I take your point that Amit Shah's letter, which I would describe as an audacious letter, not just proves that there is internal democracy in the BJP, it also is embedded, as you said, in the deep-rooted attachment to the idea of Akhand Bharat in the BJP. But come back to my question. You qualified by saying he was a critic from the right. In other words, he is still a critic. He was critical of going nuclear, and he believed it was a terrible mistake. Is that right?
No, but he was a critic of Pakistan. See, I mean, just to be clear, he was a critic of Pakistan openly going nuclear. That was his point. And his point, by the way, there were many people during that time on the right, hawks in India, felt that nuclear testing obviated the obvious conventional superiority that India had versus Pakistan.
Vinay, I'm going to interrupt you. Forgive me.
Yes.
The letter which you quote does not suggest that he's critical of the fact that Vajpayee, having gone nuclear, then provoked Pakistan into going nuclear.
Oh, no, that's the point. That's the point.
The letter says, and I'm quoting that letter, your greed for publicity has forever denied India the chance to win POK by war.
Yes.
The criticism is of Vajpayee in terms of greed for publicity, and the fact that this greed for publicity means India can now never regain POK by war. So he is criticizing the decision to go nuclear. Surely you can't deny that.
But you have to look at the law. Absolutely, there's no question about it. But the point is something that...
Are you therefore confirming Amit Shah was critical of the decision to go nuclear? Can you confirm that? Because it's quite apparent.
No, only because it gave China the opportunity to help Pakistan and reduced India's conventional superiority. That's the point.
Sure.
And Karan, what he's saying is not unique within Hindu nationalism.
Vinay,
Many Hindu nationalists have this view that...
I don't deny that the reason he's critical is that it gave China an opportunity to help Pakistan. That's the explanation. But confirm the fact. Is he or is he not critical of the decision to go nuclear? To me, it's apparent. Suddenly, having made it in your book, you seem to be stepping away from it. So I'm asking...
No, not at all, not at all. But, look, he's he's a man...
Answer my question. Is he or is he...
I am.
Is he critical?
He was, Karan, as a young politician. That was his reaction at the time. Do I think he's still critical? I don't know. I have no way to divine his mind. But circa 1998, the facts speak for themselves. And look, the fact of this letter is not controversial, right? And the fact of the logic is also not controversial within the RSS. What is controversial is that you have a young politician who have the audacity to write to the Prime Minister. That is controversial.
The logic is your interpretation to explain the letter. I'm coming back to what you said. In 1998, when he was 33 and an MLA in Gujarat, Amit Shah was critical. You're accepting that he was critical.
Oh, yeah, that's the point. That's the point of the story, Karan. There's no debate about it. But I think it's very important that along with the headlines, the context is very, very important. And the context is not unique. There were many people within the Jansangh, within the BJP, who wanted to use India's conventional military superiority to regain POK and were worried that a shared nuclear umbrella. And by the way, Karan, the same
to the context to dilute the fact he was critical. The important
the context is very important because that's the same context.
Let me finish. It's too important an issue for you to diffuse it by bringing up context. The important thing is that a man who is today the Home Minister of India and considered the second most powerful man in the government, in 1998 when he was 33 and a young MLA was critical of the decision to go nuclear, he believed that as a result, India had lost the chance of winning back POK by war. That is undeniable.
But Karan, even Pervez Musharraf believed this. He launched the Kargil attack because under the mistaken argument...
Don't answer my question by...
No, there's no debate.
Because you know the impression you're giving. I'm being honest with you. I'm being honest with you. You're giving the impression that having exposed this letter or revealed it, you're now backing away from what it shows. By giving...
Oh, no, absolutely not.
So
what it shows is a...
Can you in one sentence confirm you have provided letter and evidence?
Oh, there's no debate. There's no debate. There's just no debate. The only insinuation that I'm pushing back, Karan, is there's something inconsistent about the argument of the young Amit Shah. It's not inconsistent at all.
Vinay, that insinuation wasn't there in my question.
Right.
I simply brought up the fact that are you confirming this man was...
Oh, there's no debate. I have footnotes there. I spoke to 3 people. I can off record, I can tell you exact. There's no debate on the facts. Zero, right? The only debate and the interpretation matters because it tells you something deeper. And, without that context, the story doesn't make any sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense even without the context. The context actually diffuses the criticism or interprets it and makes it seem not as bad as it is. So let's stick to the facts. The context is your interpretation. Now, let me ask you this. In your book, in the footnotes, you admit that this is told to you by, quote, a senior journalist who wishes to remain unnamed. How confident are you this is an accurate and true story?
100% confident. I can tell you offline, Karan. I can tell you offline, and then you'll come online and say, yes, Vinay is 100% confident. In fact, Karan, by the way, you helped me for this book, and you told me a fantastic source who I pursued for 6 months, who then said, I don't want my name attached to it, and I respect that. Offline, I'm very happy to tell you, and then I hope you come back and tell your listeners that, look, I'm satisfied.
But hang on a second. It's very interesting that a senior journalist should tell you a story of such devastating proportions and you not be able to carry his name or in any...
No. The journalist is...
Vinay, you have to let me finish.
Yes.
Or in any other way confirm
yes.
what that journalist said. Have you?
Oh, no. That source has more than one confirmation. It has actually 3 different people who confirm it. In matters this sensitive, one must go extra to protect the source. In this particular case, Karan, I'm quite happy to tell you offline. So, and I hope you then tell your readers that Vinay was right.
Now, tell me this. Have you seen the letter Amit Shah allegedly wrote to Vajpayee?
No, I have not.
You have not seen the letter?
No.
In which case, how do you know the letter exists? Other than
because one person confirmed the existence of the letter. Then I met someone who had seen the letter, who was in the Vajpayee government between 1998 and 2004. And then I have a third source who, as I said, I'm very happy to tell you online, but I just can't do it, Karan. To give you an example, a lot of the people who, including you, by the way, who trusted me in this book, maybe it's about 10% of the sources or 20% of the sources I can't reveal. And, and I just hope that the reader sees the 1800 footnotes, the other 80% of sources, and just decides to trust me.
Vinay Sitapati, I'm interrupting you because whether you have 1 or 3 unnamed sources, they are all hearsay. You are relying on...
No.
No one has
Karan, I'm very happy to tell you offline. I just can't reveal it on the show. It would be unfair to more than one. As I said, that story is backed by 3 different people.
Vinay, I'm not asking you to release the names of the sources. I'm saying, have you seen the letter that Shah...
No, I haven't. I saw 2 people read the letter and told me about it. And then a third source, which I'm happy to reveal to you, as I said. And then I hope, Karan, with the same fervor, you tell your readers that you trust Vinay.
But hang on a second. You're saying 2 people who read the letter confirmed the contents to you.
And then there's a third source. So it's a 3-source story. That particular... Look, I was well aware how sensitive it was. I was well aware.
Vinay, if you haven't read the letter yourself, if you haven't seen the letter yourself, how can you confirm it? How are those quotations?
Because you just quoted the footnote, Karan. I say very clearly that it was told to me. I haven't seen it. I say it in the footnote. And I trust the reader to read the footnote and realize that.
What you say in the footnote is the story was told to you. I'm asking you, how do you quote from the letter if you haven't read it or seen it? How do you know these are accurate quotations? Because they're there in
because 2 people... No, because 2 people had read the letter and a third confirmed it. 3 sources, Karan, is very strong for a story, and it hasn't been denied. It's very strong.
If these people have read the letter, I presume they're recounting the letter from memory. How can you...
Yeah, and look, there's a larger point there, Karan, which is that even you, when I spoke to you, you're recounting from memory. And one of the things I realized is that in the same room, you could have 2 people. They don't have any malified intent, but they remember things slightly differently. It's, the Rashomon effect. So that's just when you deal with issues like oral history, and mine is a 100-year history. So in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, I can access a lot of documents. But as you come to, for example, the story you mentioned is around 98. You rely on people and their memories, and what you have, and memories, even in the best of times, right, tends to be, and even when there's no malified, it's just memories playing tricks on you. The solution is that you have to triangulate and you have to have 3 different sources. That's the only way to solve it.
Lost in that answer, you are confirming that this quotation is in fact recounted from memory by a third.
I say that, Karan. It's there in the footnote. I literally say that.
No, you don't say in the footnote that the quotation is recounted from memory.
I said the story was told to me. I say the story was told to me.
Yes. Absolutely. The story was told to you. I'm asking you, how can you put that letter, the quotation, in quotation marks?
Because there were 3 people who confirmed it. And once again, Karan, I just hope that once I tell you this offline, you can write in your next column that I am satisfied.
Yeah, but the main thing is that in fact 3 people.
And look, there's a larger point there, Karan.
Vinay, you have to let me finish. You are confirming that 3 people recounted from memory. I'm repeating it, recounted from memory.
For sure.
And you accepted it and put it in quotation marks, but you have no idea whether those quotations are actually accurate quotations or not. You're relying on the memory of 3 people.
Oh yes, and I say that in the footnote. That's exactly right. And Karan, it's not just for this one. Yes.
You keep saying you say it in the footnote, but you don't. What you say in the footnote is that the story was told to you by senior journalists.
That's right.
Not that the quotation is recounted from a third person.
Oh yeah, but the point being, I didn't read the letter. The story was told to me by someone. That's literally what the footnote says, Karan. And I leave it to the readers to see that very obvious point.
Spent a lot of time on this because what people in the BJP will say
Yes.
is that he has made this up, that this letter doesn't exist, it was never written, it is therefore a creation of Vinay Sitapati's imagination. That is the criticism.
I wish, Karan, they haven't said it so far, and they're, it's supported by 3 people. And as I said offline, I just hope once I tell you that. And look, there's no way on earth I can reveal that. So the 2 sources on this show, because if I do that, look, there are 2 people there are 2 different constituencies who have to trust me in the writing of this book. The first is the reader, right? And that's why I have 1,800 footnotes. Like for example, I quote about 100 names that I do meet, but there may be about roughly 100 names that I can't quote, because unlike my previous book, the Narasimha Rao book, this is sensitive. Like people are in government, that's just part of the deal.
What you're basically saying to the reader is, trust me, I know what I'm saying.
Trust me for 5% of the book, and the basis of that 5% is the 95% you can see.
I'm not talking about the 95, I'm talking about this specific letter.
Yeah, that's part of the 5%.
Well, hang on, it's not 5% of the book, it's just a paragraph in the book on page 211. It's just
but there are a few others. Like if you look at the footnotes, you will see a few other places where I don't quote. To give you one example, there are lots of senior Congress. Yes.
Let's stick to this issue. I'm not talking about other footnotes. All I'm saying is on this.
I'm just saying, Karan, I've written a book on 100 years, and you're talking about like a footnote.
Why won't you let me put the question to you?
Of course.
On this specific issue of your claim that Amit Shah wrote a letter in '98 criticizing the decision to go nuclear. You are asking the reader to accept that you're right. You can't actually prove you've seen the letter. All you can say is that 3 people who've seen it themselves have told you about it. You haven't seen it.
Yes.
Secondly, let me finish.
Yes.
You also quote from the letter in quotation marks, but you haven't seen it or read it. Again, you're trusting 3 people who've seen it, but this time, those 3 are recounting the letter from memory. They hadn't got the letter in front of them when they were quoting it to you. But you're accepting all of that, and so there's a lot of trust here.
Not really. Not really. I don't. That's not true. I even say that. Had I said there that I saw the letter, I say this was told to me. It's there in the footnote. And I hope, Karan, you also tell the reader I hope you tell the reader the particular footnote, so then the reader can see for herself.
And the impression you're going to give the audience is that you have not got full, reliable proof or backing for what you've said.
Oh no, Karan, 3 people is a lot. 3 people is a lot, Karan. 3 independent people is a lot. It doesn't, a lot of what passes for journalism is based on single story. 3 different people, and these 3, and the other criteria to check in these kind of cases is, are the 3 one cabal, right? Because then you just end up with one kind of story, and this isn't. And as I said, Karan, in your case, I'm very, very happy to tell you this online. I just can't do it on the show. It would be wrong to my sources.
What you can tell me offline is the names of these people. Maybe you'll give
a couple of names. I can't tell you all 3 names. I can tell you 2 of them.
But unfortunately, what you can't do is confirm that what you put in quotations as a quotation from the letter is actually a genuine quotation, because you relied on 3 people's memory, and those 3 people didn't have the letter where they were quoting it. They were from memory, and yet you put it in quotation marks. You put it in quotation marks.
Yes, and I say that as told to me. I literally say that. But yes, I mean, I'm not quibbling with you, Karan, because we're going in circles.
On this issue, because I don't want to get stuck. This will be a credibility issue for you. Do you realize that?
Oh, not at all. In fact, the one thing I'm very proud about this book is both from the left and the right, it's got very positive reviews. There are people who disagree with me. So, for example, one source of disagreement is...
Vinay, I'm talking of this account of Amit Shah will be a credibility.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. It hasn't been disputed. It hasn't been questioned. It fits into the larger view. And I've spoken since to 2 of the 3 people. They don't have a particular objection. Luckily, they haven't been found out by the powers that be. So your investigation has not worked for them. So for me, my comfort of my source is the most important thing, because for my next book, Karan, they'll never speak to me if I betray them.
Okay, let's now move on to what I believe is the very heart and core of your book, what you describe as the Jugalbandi between Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Krishna Advani. Now, most people had thought that they were in fact near equals. But you reveal that right through his life, Advani was in awe of Vajpayee. And even when Advani became Deputy Prime Minister and Home Minister, he didn't play such a central and critical role in that government from 1998 to 2004, as most people think. You point out that on economic policy and foreign policy, even though he was Deputy Prime Minister, he was hardly ever consulted. And in fact,
That's
many
right.
things
That's
that he
right.
wanted didn't happen. Some things that he was opposed to did happen. So does it mean that the Vajpayee-Advani combination was not similar to Nehru-Patel? Nehru-Patel were clearly equals, these two were not.
Well, during the time period you described, Karan, which is 98 to 2004, you're absolutely right, that Vajpayee was the boss. Vajpayee frankly thought about Advani as somebody who should handle the party. He didn't think Minister Advani amounted to much, which is why he trusted Brajesh Mishra. And that was, that was a period of heavy tension. And I think you cover that period yourself. So that was a period of heavy tension in the relationship. Note, however, that even during this period, when it comes to party matters, Advani is still boss. So, for example, in 2001, around that time, when it comes to the selection of Narendra Modi to replace Keshubhai Patel as Gujarat Chief Minister, it's Advani, not Vajpayee, who does it, right? Once again, in April 2002, a couple of months after the Gujarat riots, when Vajpayee wants Modi to go and Advani backs Modi as Chief Minister of Gujarat, Vajpayee bends and once again agrees to Advani because Advani has the year of the Carter. So while it's absolutely true that it wasn't an equal partnership in government, if you take the larger movement, which includes party, cadre, as well as government, there was an allocation of responsibilities that was on balance quite equal. Plus, Karan, in the previous period, which is 1986 roughly to 1995, it was Advani who was boss and Vajpayee who served under him, right? That's the period where the BJP is taking a radical turn.
But Vinay, the important point is during the 6 years of that government, 98 to 2004, he may have been Deputy Prime Minister for the last few years, but he was not as important a figure in that government as Patel was in the first Nehru government.
Oh, there's no question about it. And, I also am on this, I'm a bit critical of Vajpayee, as you've noticed, Karan. But on this one, Advani wasn't a very good minister because the kind of qualities required to be good in government, make quick decisions, be willing to upset certain people. Ironically, Advani, when it came to the party cadre, his key qualities was consensus building and patience. And those aren't very good qualities when you come to government.
You have, in fact, in your book, some fascinating insights and revelations of Advani's personality. First of all, you say, Advani acted more bigoted than he really was. So was the hardline image that we all have of Advani a mask?
Well, I'm glad you pointed that out, Karan, because I suspect that you were one of the quotes for that line. And look, here's the background, Karan. Think about the social world that Advani comes from, right? He speaks English before he speaks Hindi. He comes from a rich background. He studies in St. Patrick's, a missionary school. He grows up in the cosmopolitan world of Karachi in the 1920s and 30s, which is akin to Bombay of that period. And the strand of Hinduism the Advani's practice is quite syncretic. There is Sikh rituals practiced at home, and his mother goes to a Sufi shrine to pray. So that's the background of Advani. If it hadn't been for the looming catastrophe of partition, Advani would have never joined the RSS. This is my counterfactual. And he would have never joined Hindu nationalism because he is, to use that word of sin used by the RSS, a Macaulay Putra. And his whole life is about making sense of the fact that his rich family has been reduced to penury. His idea of Sindh as heart of sacred geography of India, is now part of a different country. And what I find remarkable of such a man is that when it comes to making peace with Pakistan, and I have a whole chapter, Karan, where you play a role, where I say that Vajpayee was the prime minister who did more for peace with Pakistan and Kashmir than anyone else. And Vajpayee had his own reasons. That was a grand gesture on his part. But contrary to the RSS's dream and desire, Advani supported Vajpayee 100%. And I think that makes him a greater man because he had more ghosts in his closet that he wished to slay.
Now you say another thing of Advani that I found both fascinating and revealing. You say Advani was more a man of principle than Vajpayee. And you add Advani was less altered by makeup. Can you explain this a little further?
Yes. And even that story on makeup was told to me by a senior congressman who, alas, Karan, I can reveal to you, I've already revealed to you outside, but I can't reveal here. But it's a very deep point, which is that, and the whole quote is that, you need to be a bit of an actor when it comes to politics. Advani wasn't an actor, Vajpayee was an actor, and Modi is an even bigger actor, right? Which is when it came to Vajpayee, he was, like, to give you a very simple example, Vajpayee had this, conveyed this impression of being a moderate or a liberal, right? There is, of course, like all images, there is truth to it, right? But that there isn't the whole truth to it. To give you the two classical examples, he opposed the Ayodhya movement from 1983 itself. He opposed Advani getting on top of the Rath Yatra in 1990. And he even told Advani on the phone, right? When after Advani had left Somnath. Yeah.
You are, as the author of the book, know an awful lot. But don't blind us with details. Come back and explain that critical sentence. Advani was more a man of principle than Vajpayee.
Yes.
Explain that.
What you saw with Advani is what you got. To give you another example, which makes that point, and look, the book is full of details. My arguments come through details. Kushwant Singh has a wonderful line on Advani saying that Advani is a man without weaknesses. He doesn't drink, he doesn't womanize, and he's not corrupt. Such men are dangerous. So Advani is, a man who has clarity. What you see is what you get. He, ever since the catastrophe of partition, he's not somebody who wants to say something in parliament, do something else with the cadre. He has his ear to the ground when it comes to the cadre and the RSS. He is not invested in looking good in front of the opposition party. That's Vajpayee's game, right? And to give you just one more example of this, Karan, in 2005, Advani goes all the way to Pakistan, where he makes a speech in Jinnah's Mausoleum, where he says to the effect that Jinnah was an ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. And that is, of course, I think a quote by Sarojini Naidu, and it's an accurate quote, but it leads to him almost getting fired from the BJP by the RSS because he doesn't know how to say without saying. He says straight, he stays simply. Vajpayee, on the other hand, in the late 90s, when he gets on the bus and goes to Lahore, he says pretty much similar things. But he has the ability to pretend without pretending, to say without saying, which is why Vajpayee was the greater politician. And Advani's inability to act, inability to pretend, has been his undoing in trying to get the biggest job in town.
In fact, I'm going to quote something from your book where you very much make this point. You say, it's easy to fall in love with Vajpayee, an Epicurean, a charmer. It's harder to fall for the colorless, odorless Advani. But it seems, as you point out, that Vajpayee's charm was deceptive. He was often, as you say, acting. Advani, as you point out, was not a good actor. What you saw is what you got. And the question I want to ask is this. Was Advani's truthfulness, his lack of guile, a disadvantage for him?
100%, right? His lack of guile was a disadvantage. But I don't want to take from that, Karan, the fact that Vajpayee was only acting. That's not true. He had liberal instincts, right? He genuinely opposed the Ayodhya movement. He genuinely did not want sadhus to be part of a political movement. But he always had this underlying anxiety that he was a guest artist to the party. And so when the party moved to the right and he felt that he risked being abandoned, then he quickly moved to the right of the party. Like, look, I'm an admirer of Vajpayee. I think he was a great prime minister. But let me just finish. After his inability to sack Modi, Vajpayee gave the most anti-Muslim speech of his career. Now, what does that tell you?
We'll come to Vajpayee in a moment's time, but please build on what you said of Advani. You agreed that Advani's lack of guile was his disadvantage.
Yes.
In other words, because he couldn't pretend, because he couldn't present two faces, because he didn't know how to appeal to different people in different ways, his political career didn't succeed as effectively. Is that what you're suggesting as well?
Absolutely, but it's a combination of a lack of guile and underconfidence. And in my sense is his correct assessment of the man's own limitations. So in that sense, a lack of guile. And the book begins with that story that in 1995, after 9 years, it's Advani who has brought the BJP to the cusp of power. And what does he do? Instead of becoming prime minister himself, with a man with a little more guile might have done, Karan, he announces Atal Bihari Vajpayee as prime minister. And he does that because he knows that brand Advani, right? The hardline brand Advani is not capable of attracting coalition allies. Vajpayee was. And he was right. So in addition to this lack of guile, I think there's something about him that is remarkable, was that here was a politician keenly aware of his own limitations. And look, it definitely hurt his own career, but it has immeasurably benefited his party. And for that, the BJP still owes him a lot of thanks.
In fact, as you point out, he was an incredibly honest man. And part of that honesty is the fact that he recognized his limits. And as a result of recognizing his limits, he also put a check to how far his political career to go. Let's now come to Vajpayee, because actually in your book, you reveal Vajpayee in a much more, and this is my phrase, damning light. You repeatedly suggest that at critical moments, Vajpayee would not stand by his principles. The two most telling moments were, one, his attitude to the demolition of the Babri Masjid, and secondly, his insistence that Narendra Modi must resign in 2002 as Chief Minister of Gujarat. And you point out in your book that when he realized that his party was annoyed or offended by his position, he would do a somersault. Rather than stand by his principles and beliefs, he would effectively sacrifice them to win the favor or popularity of his party.
That's absolutely right. And just to be clear, Karan, this is the, when you look at Advani and Vajpayee, this is the public impression of Vajpayee. He's this high. And this is the public impression of Advani. It's this low, right? What my book does is this, right? It just puts Vajpayee just a little down. It says, look, I think he was a great one of India's greatest prime ministers, but this charismatic man who was, every liberal's idea of what a Hindu nationalist should be, I complicate that, right? And this idea that Advani is a straight up bigot, I complicate that, right? I say that they were a Jugalbandi. They were two parts of the same story. One needed the other. So I don't want to, it's not that I'm disrespectful to Vajpayee, but certainly I puncture a little bit of this grand aura. And I think one of the reasons I'm able to do that, Karan, is unlike you, I never met Vajpayee. So I was never seduced by him. Every single person who spent time with Vajpayee, it as if they had met Elvis Presley. The man could do no wrong, right? And because I have this benefit of distance, I could just look at the facts and be a little more dispassionate.
As you say, you're never disrespectful of Vajpayee, but actually, I get the clear impression you don't admire him either. Let me quote something that you write, and I'm quoting you. The reason for Vajpayee's U-turns is not hard to divine. Vajpayee's first liberal reaction would be followed by the realization that he risked being cast aside by his party. He would then leap to his party's defense, a leap not of faith, but of moral acrobatics. Moral acrobatics clearly suggests that you don't admire the leap.
Well, I certainly don't admire the leaps in those two cases, but human beings are complicated. For example, as I show in my book, he ran a very successful government when it came to foreign policy and economic policy. He was not a hypocrite on social issues. He drank occasionally. He didn't try to hide that. He ate non-vegetarian food. He loved fish and prawn. Again, he didn't try to hide that. And most importantly of all, I spend a lot of time talking about Rajkumari Kaul, his companion for over 40 years. He made no attempt to hide it. And I have a story there where when the RSS tells him, Golwalkar tells him to break off the relationship, he refuses to do it. He would rather pursue his love than listen to the RSS, even when he's a young MP trying to make it. So human beings are complex. In the two examples that you gave, certainly he's indulging in moral acrobatics, but there are other parts of him which are justifiably grand.
But you do accept that when it was an issue of his views versus the popularity of the cadre or the party, he was prepared to sacrifice his views. That's when he would do moral acrobatics to ensure that the way his party looked at him wasn't damaged because of the principles he was upholding.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, the facts are very clear that on the Ayodhya movement and Babri Masjid, he both initially opposed these movements, but then played the defense lawyer of the BJP after the demolition of Babri Masjid. But at the same time, Karan, he was a complicated man. So K.S. Sudarshan, the head of the RSS when Vajpayee was prime minister for most of that time between 98 and 2004, was a trenchant critic of Vajpayee's economic policy. He did not back down, right? So it was, I guess, on... Sorry, go ahead.
He was forced at the very outset not to have Jaswant Singh as finance minister.
Yes.
Prime ministership by backing down.
Yes, but Vajpayee being Vajpayee, as you know, and I have that story, a few months later, by hook and by crook and by this acting that we're talking about, Jaswant was back. So Vajpayee definitely was a better politician than Advani because he knew how to play the long game.
He wasn't quite back. He was brought into the Planning Commission, the deputy chairman.
Oh no, then he became finance minister, then he became foreign minister. He was back. Yes.
Much later.
Yes.
He didn't come back as foreign minister for a whole while. Least for a whole. In fact, I think that only happened in the second prime ministership. In the first best he could do was make him deputy chairman. Now, towards the end of your book, you make a very interesting comparison between what you call the Jugalbandi of Advani and Vajpayee and the combination of Modi and Shah. You write, Modi and Shah are more ruthless to political opponents than Vajpayee and Advani ever were. Is that why the present government is feared, but the first BJP government was respected, even for some people admired?
But the reason for that was you're right, Karan, but the reason for that is just the law of arithmetic and numbers. Vajpayee, had 170 to 180 seats, the BJP under Vajpayee. He couldn't afford to act like Modi. Like a large part of the argument of the book is that the difference between these two Jugalbandis is the context in which they operated. I mean, Vajpayee ran a minority government. He needed coalition allies. He had to put on the back burner the controversial issues of Article 370, Uniform Civil Code, etc., etc. Modi doesn't have to do that. He has a luxury because he has the mandate. And that's a key point of how the book ends, that Modi is a better politician. He's able to win more seats and that gives him much more of an elbow room.
You make another point about Vajpayee and Modi. You say Vajpayee was undoubtedly a charmer. He was undoubtedly the best orator India has had. Of Modi, you say, he has an almost mystical connect with the voter. Does that mean that as far as the opposition is concerned, Modi is much more difficult to combat and defeat than Vajpayee ever was?
Oh, 100%, 100%. And the larger point of this book, Karan, is that the opposition must take the BJP's commitment to elections seriously, right? From morning to evening, whether it's the Hyderabad municipal election, the Bengal state elections, the Modi is on it, right? That's all he's thinking about. Vajpayee and Advani didn't do that, right? And that makes Modi just much harder to beat. But on the other hand, stop calling the BJP fascists, writing like strong op-eds, against, saying that the BJP has, fixed institutions. The BJP has been able to control institutions because it has elected power, not the other way around, right? The BJP gets corporate money because it wins elections. I show you through the book that when the BJP was nowhere near power, no Bombay corporate was even willing to give a rupee to the BJP. Absolutely. The only way to beat the BJP is to defeat them on election day, right? That is Modi's genius. And in this, Modi is far more similar to Indira Gandhi than he is to Vajpayee and Advani.
Let me at this point come to the third issue I indicated in the introduction, your shocking revelations about Modi in 2002. And I have a horrible feeling once again we're going to start quarreling. You say of Narendra Modi on the 28th of February 2002, just hours after the killings had started, and you're quoting at this point the journalist Sheila Bhatt. You write.
Oh no, that story. It's the morning of. It's the morning after.
On page 265, you quote Sheila Bhatt. You say so in the book, and you confirm it in the footnotes when you say it was an interview with Sheila Bhatt. And this is what you write. Modi was a person totally shaken up. Modi was struggling to get a grip on the situation. And Sheila Bhatt tells you, but you accept it, I could see that he was really frightened. Now, absolutely no one else has ever said this about Modi. You're the first to reveal that he was paralyzed by fear in the early hours of the 28th of February 2002.
Well, to be fair, Karan, I would love to take credit. Yeah.
You have to let me finish. How do you know this is true? I know.
I would love to take credit for this. I would love to take credit. I would love to be the only one who take credit for it. But a lot of Gujarati journalists, including some I quote in the footnotes, were able, because they were able to trace minute by minute what Modi was doing. And this is the story that emerges. Narendra Modi had never held a government job before he became chief minister in late 2001, right? He was literally parachuted from Delhi by Advani to become chief minister of Gujarat. He didn't know the difference between joint secretary and additional secretary. He just didn't know that, right? He had just become chief minister, right? And here's a man who is the first pracharak to become chief minister. And the VHP says that under your chief ministership, 59 Hindu activists have been burnt alive, right? The one thing I realized very quickly, Karan, is that while liberals and English-speaking liberals like myself saw the Gujarat riots solely through the prism of state complicity in the murder of largely Muslim Hindu nationalists. Sorry.
Because you're going into deep background, which is equivalent to the question I asked. My question is a very simple one.
Yes.
On what basis have you accepted Sheila Bhatt's claim that Modi was paralyzed by fear? On what basis have you accepted her claim he was really frightened, he was struggling to get a grip on the situation, he was a person totally shaken up? On what basis have you accepted this? So
Karan, that particular quote, and again, the book is a detailed quote, is not a general claim about Modi during the riots. She says that morning she goes and she sees that she's scared, right? Now the question, I'm finished, Karan. You asked the question. Let me answer. You asked the question. No, you asked the question. Yes. So the question is, what else do I have there in the book that substantiates this particular claim? Sorry, go ahead.
I made it clear in my question. This is about 28th February 2002.
Yes.
It's about that moment a few hours after the killing started. No one claims it was a general comment on Modi handling. It was on that morning, a few hours after the killing. And what basis have you accepted he was paralyzed by fear?
But that's not my judgment, Karan. I tell you literally the journalist goes to meet her in the morning, and that's the impression she has. And then that's it. That's the story, right? And then I tell you over the next few days and the day previously, right, which is the day of the Godhra train burning, how Modi is acting through various other incidents, and that seems to make a link. And once again, right, that's not my claim. That's a story of one person who met him, and I quote it in the morning, but it links to the larger narrative that seems to run through those 3 or 4 days. And Karan, if you remember, in the first 4 or 5 days after the Godhra train burning, go ahead.
Don't blind us with detail. All I'm saying is,
but detail matters, Karan. Everything else is opinion.
You've accepted Sheila Bhatt's claim. You don't dispute it. The fact that you quoted at considerable length means that you believe it's the truth. And all I'm asking is this.
Don't you think that's an important story? Literally the morning after the train burning, you have somebody who meets him and she gives you her opinion, right? And you can see her and readers are, and this is not my opinion. I give you the footnote. You can judge, right? You can judge and you can make your own judgment. But the fact that particular story, go ahead.
Vinay, when you quote someone at the length to which you quote Sheila Bhatt, you're clearly agreeing with what she's saying. You're accepting it as the truth. And my question is simple. On what basis have you accepted it as truth? She's told
Oh, no, that's not how this book works at all, Karan. This book is not a book of my opinion, right? You as a reader have the power to look at the footnote, and literally you seem to be coming to a judgment, and all power to you, right? It's not my job is to tell you that. Now, right, what would have been unforgivable, let me finish, Karan, is at the same time, right, or in the few hours before or after, there was somebody else who met Modi, right, who came to a radically different conclusion about Modi, saying that, and what is that radically different conclusion, right, which is that Modi was sitting and making lists and conspiring about what Muslims to kill. If somebody had that evidence and I didn't quote that, that would be unforgivable, right? But
let me ask you a simple question. Just as you claimed earlier that 3 different people had backed up the story about Amit Shah, has a second person backed up this impression of Sheila Bhatt's that Modi?
Oh yeah, I have it in the footnote. You can. Why don't you check that? And this is the impression. So there are 2 different points you're making. One is the fact, right? Now
in the book on page 265, you only quote Sheila Bhatt, but you quote her exclusively. I'm asking
No. But it's only. But Karan, once again, it's. Karan, I think you're used to interviewing people who have books based on opinion. I'm giving you a story that she says she saw. And if you look at all the pages before and after, the general impression that here was a man who was scared, right? Who was terrified that his Hindu constituency was leaving him, right? That's the larger point, right? That there's plenty of evidence backing that up, right? But on the particular, like, I wish I had these flies on the wall where, you know, somebody tells me something, I can go and check. And if it's a single source story, which it's this case, I tell you the source, okay, right? And I trust the reader to make the judgment up.
Let me come to something else you reveal. Again, as far as I know, for the very first time. Again, it's on page 265.
But Karan, I must interrupt. The general point, in fact, there's a lovely quote, and I give the quote there by a Gujarati journalist who says that, you know, and adds to this point that Modi was scared, and he very quickly realized that the real constituency he must make happy are the Hindu nationalists, not the Lutyens liberals. That's the deeper insight, okay, that we constantly see Modi as a conniver. What he was an opportunist. That's the deeper point there.
Okay, you've covered the Modi one. You've answered my question on what basis do you accept what Sheeta has told you as truth. Let's now come to a second revelation. This time, again, it's on page 265. Again, it's about something that happened on the 28th of February 2002, but it concerns George Fernandes. Then
yes.
And let me quote from your book. George Fernandes visited a police kiosk. The police wireless was on when he entered. What he heard stunned him. He later told a friend, I heard voices of some BJP MLAs directing the violence, telling the police not to do anything. Now, George Fernandes never said this in public.
No.
I ask you, how do you know this story is true? By the way...
Oh, no, I have to. So I can... I'm very happy to reveal, but I just... I can... Yeah.
There is no footnote in your book backing up this story. Absolutely.
No, it isn't.
You don't know where you heard it or who from. So how do you know it's true?
I can't reveal who told me that, and you can know why. Do you think George Fernandes wanted this publicly known? But this, I just can't tell you that on this. I mean, but look, here's the point, Karan, and you're a fantastic journalist because you've literally picked the 3 or 4% of the books where I don't have footnotes, and you're good at it, right? But when you do a book like this, and especially a sentence like that, it's very, very sensitive. Here's a man who's part of the government, who's a defense minister, who hears this. He should have resigned. He doesn't resign, right? He tells a lot of people this, by the way. He doesn't, and...
No.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
The important thing, Vinay, is that at no point in time did he say this in public, that he had been in a police kiosk where BJP MPs were ringing up and telling the police not to do anything and actually directing the violence. George never revealed this to anyone. More importantly, in your book, neither in the book nor in the footnotes do you reveal how you found this out. There isn't a single thing about this.
No, this one I was just too sensitive. So I don't even by mistake, I don't want this traced back to the source. I really owe my source for this one. I just cannot do it. And once again, Karan, the deal is quite clear to the reader. If you trust me, I have 1,800 footnotes there. If you trust me in the 95%, you got to trust me for the 5%. And that's the balancing act when it comes to a book, which is so sensitive like this, which is I have a relationship with the reader, but I also have a relationship with my source. And for something like this is so sensitive, right? That I have to be careful. That I didn't even write, I didn't even say told to me by, you know.
The only problem is that George Fernandes didn't breathe a word of this to anyone.
Oh no, he did. This is not, unlike the other story, this one is actually pretty widely known. He just didn't speak about it publicly, right? And he didn't speak about it publicly for the obvious reason that, you know, he was always associated with the BJP even after the BJP lost power. He never broke with the BJP.
Let me end. I know the core of your book is about what you call the Jugalbandi between L.K. Advani and Vajpayee. However, I'm going to end by asking you a question about Narendra Modi. Do you believe that he mishandled 2002? Your book shows that first on the 28th of February, when the killings began, he was paralyzed by fear. He was totally shaken up. Secondly, your book shows that George Fernandes had proof that BJP MLAs were ringing up police stations, telling them how to direct the violence, telling them not to do anything about it. So, do you believe Modi mishandled 2002?
I think any BJP chief minister would have behaved this way. What makes Modi different is not current February, March, April 2002. Everybody focuses on that. What makes Modi different is December 2002, when he calls elections, as you know, right? And that elections is exclusively about Hindutva, right? So that's what makes him different, right? There's been a failure of law and order. There's been a breakdown of law and order machinery. But Modi makes that into a political event, and his victory, yeah, go ahead.
Vinay, do not deflect. My question is simple. I'm sure December 2002 makes Modi different, but that's not my question. My question is this. Given that you have shown that Modi was paralyzed with fear when the killings were happening, given that you have shown that George Fernandez has proof that BJP MLAs were ringing up and telling the police not to stop the violence and actually directing the violence, do you believe Modi mishandled 2002? Because he did not stop his MLAs directing the violence. He did not stop his MLAs telling the police not to do anything about the violence. Hence my question, did he mishandle it?
Well, I think the question is the following, which is, what do you mean by mishandling? If you mean legally, the courts have given him a clean sheet. If the question is politically, he made hay, right? So far from saying that it was an error, he was fearful, he made hay. His political career has been built on the fact that he stood up for the Hindus against the Muslims on those days. If the question is that was he a dereliction of the law, dereliction of constitutional duty, the courts have already spoken, right? But if it's the political question, he actually used it to advantage.
I don't want to start another quarrel with you over the courts. The courts ruled on the basis of evidence that's available. There was no evidence available of Modi's complicity, so the courts came to a particular...
That's right.
That's right. You, however, for the first time have provided evidence, quoting George Fernandez, that BJP MLAs were actually directing the...
Yeah, but as I said, Karan, that's not the complicity of Modi.
You must let me finish. You, for the first time, have provided evidence that BJP MLAs were directing the violence, that BJP MLAs were telling the police not to do anything to contain the violence. And clearly, if his MLAs are doing this and he's not stopping them, that suggests some level of complicity, if that's the right word. It certainly suggests that he didn't have the leadership. And certainly your earlier point that he was paralyzed with fear suggests that he wasn't a leader either. Leaders aren't...
No, I think the much simpler explanation was he was not in control. I think that's the much simpler explanation there. He just wasn't in control. He was a new chief minister. He didn't know what was happening. He didn't understand government. The cynical opportunism, and Karan, I have to emphasize this, is not because riots in India are not new. Most of the riots, and the data on this is very clear, has happened during Congress rule, right? The riots, but what is new is the use of riots to win elections in the way it happened in December 2002. As I point in the book, that marks the end of Vajpayee and Advani and their belief that you need to cater to the radical and the moderate, and the beginning of Modi and Shah.
You are brilliant at deflecting, particularly when you don't have source material to back up something you've revealed.
Oh, I can tell you, Karan, I'll tell you offline.
It was not about how Modi used the riots to win an election. My question was whether he was actually in control, showing leadership or some measure of complicity.
He was not in control. The whole point of my book was, here's a man who was not in control.
You answered that when you said not in control. I thank you, Vinay, for this interview. It was pretty quarrelsome at times, certainly argumentative.
No, not at all. And I just wish that other readers read with the depth and the detail you read, Karan, because that's what it's fun, that, you push me. How do you have this source? Sometimes I can tell you offline. Sometimes I can't tell you offline. But, I hope it tells readers that you can't write a book like this without, working hard, making judgments, making decisions. It's not something written by God. And, a lot of times, as you pointed out right in the beginning, you may have as many sources as possible, but even in the best of times, the recollection is, 90%, 95%. And it's your job as a researcher and an author to weave that through. And the credibility of the way you do it is the way the reader responds to you. But I really enjoy debating with you, Karan, because you've read the book in much detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vinay, for this interview. Thank you for making time. Thank you for answering all my questions. Take care.
Yes.
Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you, Karan.